Welcome to the Light Reading Podcast, both in video and in audio. I'm Phil Harvey. I'm an editor here at Light Reading.
I'm Kelsey Zeiser. I'm also an editor at Light Reading.
And I'm Nicole McCormick. I'm the guest of the day. I'm an Omdia analyst, and I look at all things 5G pricing.
Fantastic. Welcome, Nicole. And Nicole is joining us from Brisbane, which is a suburb of Dallas in Texas, right? Or is it further away?
We did the preamble already. as the accent says, Australia.
Very good. Well, welcome. Yeah, we do. We definitely want to. Well, actually, Kelsey, you can dive in. We definitely want to talk. 5G pricing and what and all things 5G consumer. So thanks for joining us on a. We're stretched apart on time zones, but we can still make this work.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Nicole. Yeah. So we'd love to hear more about perhaps some of your recent research and also just 5G consumer data monetization. How can we make money off of 5G?
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Good question. Well, 5G in the consumer space has been around for about 2.5 years. So we do have some best practice now that thankfully I can talk about. So the basic notion is that 5G offers the consumer something more. And the telco, in turn, wants to charge a little bit more for that. But if you're going to charge a little bit more, you have to give the consumer a little bit more. So that's the crux of the research. What is that little bit more that you are offering the consumer? So my research has looked at now, well, I'm up to about 158 operators that have launched 5G. And I spend all my time sifting through Excel's thousands and thousands of 5G plans. And what I've been able to do is come up with 6 basic ways that operators are charging consumers for that 5G service. Now, on the one hand, you've got a pretty lackluster, unsophisticated model where the operator is doing nothing. There probably was a case back when they launched that it was a rush to get to market, that the network rollout was a bit patchy, but let's get the service to market. And thus they did nothing really very much on the pricing front. Just merely opened up their existing tariffs. As long as you've got a 5G handset, bang, you got yourself 5G. So no premium there. But our other 5 models have got premiums built into them, and they go up on level of sophistication. So we can delve into some of those pricing models throughout the conversation.
Excellent. Yeah, in the U.S. market, one of the initially a couple of operators charged extra for 5G. Then they sort of backed off of it and kind of folded it into a larger offering, which included some app upgrades and things like that. Like, for instance, one of the popular things to do with the 5G plan is, first of all, unlimited data. I quote unlimited. I mean, there's always some sort of limit to it. But they will bundle services like Tidal or other high-res audio music services. And the interesting thing is, even though consumers don't really have a, quote, killer app, just by virtue of getting some Netflix streaming or some Tidal bundled in, they're doing the things they would normally do, but they're using a lot more data.
Right.
How does that sort of how does that set the operator up to make money down the road, or do they just have to, or is it sort of a numbers game at that point? Is it just let's just get a certain volume of customers to upgrade to that highest tier?
Yeah, and look, you've touched on a couple of the other pricing models in that little spill there, Phil. So the first one is what we call charging an incremental fee for 5G. Give us your $10 more, and you can get all the goodies that 5G brings to market. Now, the US reneged on that. They weren't alone. Other markets, as we hit COVID, as job losses, things tightened up. Lots of those plans that went out and actively asked in a visible marketing campaign, give us €5 more. We've seen those slowly dissipate. So that's kind of at that spectrum end of the do nothing. But at the completely other end is your model that you alluded to there. We call that bundling 5G rich apps. And this really demonstrates to the consumer all those network virtues that 5G is all about, right? So they can get a feel into the faster speed. They can see in some cases what that lower latency does for the performance of those apps. So at the other end of the extreme, we rank bundling 5G rich apps as the most innovative, because that's giving the consumer some visibility on what paying a little bit more for 5G means. So we are seeing something like, out of those 158 operators today, about 22% are actively engaged in this new ecosystem, this new value chain of bundling those 5G rich apps. We would throw in there the US operators, for example, are beginning to tread down this path. We've got the Japanese, the Koreans are absolutely experts at this. Each operator in Korea would have something like 10 at least 5G rich apps, and they keep spilling out alongside things like 3D AR shopping, 3D AR kids ebooks, where your child's favorite story, or it might be an educational book, for example. There are different flavors of these apps, comes literally to life before them, and you can turn it around and get audio as well. But by far in this bucket of 5G rich apps, my research shows that today the low-hanging fruit, shall we say, is the bundling of cloud gaming. And why is that? Well, because that ecosystem, that value chain, that partnership, there's some big cloud gamers out there that exist in the market today. So it's relatively easier for the telco to go and discover this ecosystem, discover who the players are in it, and discover the monetization models. You know, the monetization gets sophisticated when we start looking at 3D AR, we start talking cloud gaming. It's not just a baseline model of give us $10 a month and you've got your cloud gaming service. You can have that model, direct monetization, but there's some really clever indirect monetization at play in some of these apps as well. So I think the bottom line is that a lot of what the operators talk to me about, they feel challenged by, is this new ecosystem, because to a lot of them, they still haven't dug into it. They don't understand it. Where do we begin? What are the forms and the types of monetization and apps that we can get into? But we are seeing operators jump buckets, if you will. So we had a year ago, we had a lot more operators in Do Nothing, but they have since jumped into more sophisticated models. So slowly, some of these new value chain propositions are being better understood.
Yeah, I think the 3D shopping sounds good. The 3D kids books, that's probably a better place to start. I like to read Stephen King, so that would not be a good use case.
I wouldn't recommend the 3D version of that. No. No.
The Shining's scary enough as a film. I don't need it popping out at the page at me.
I was just going to a quick point about the Korean operators. We just sort of finishing up our Q3 earnings reporting, and it's showing up. Their 5G monetization is starting to show up in terms of they're getting higher ARPU and more subscribers, and their profits for both, I think for KT and SKT, were at pretty high levels this time around. I think both of them credited 5G signups and additional app usage as one of the things that helped out there. So go ahead, Kelsey. Sorry.
Yeah, and I know you've identified kind of 6 pricing models, and I also wanted to get your thoughts on looking ahead. Is there an ideal model that you think operators should move towards, or you see as being the most beneficial? I mean, it sounds like the bundling the 5G rich apps is a really good way forward, but can they move the needle a little bit more?
Well, at the present moment, that is the end of our scale for innovativeness, and that's where the needle lays. So the challenge is getting these guys in the middle to sort of maybe do something else. Now, yes, one option is to bring the apps on to entice that upsell, and Phil, you're right. A big lever for driving upsell through the 5G plans themselves in Korea is through the apps. So you're not going to get cloud gaming, for example, in Korea on some of the cheaper plans. In some cases, if you want it, you've got to pay a little bit more. That's helping to drive that ARPU.
Yeah.
And they also, on your 3D books, not everyone gets that. You might have to find $5 a month more if you're not on one of those premium plans. So over time, they've built up like that sophisticated treasure chest of ones for free, ones we're going to give low tier, mid tier, but if you want the big ones, you got to find more, and that's what drives that upsell, not just from 4G to 5G, but throughout 5G as well. So yeah, the challenge is getting some of these ones stuck in the middle. So for example, 40% of operators just stagger 5G plans by data tiers, right? Ho hum, we've seen that before. There's nothing new there. But guess what? 5G, there's oodles of capacity. So instead of capping out your 4G plan, let's say at 100 gig, you can now do 200, 300, 500, unlimited, true unlimited, Phil in this case, not your US unlimited ones. And so you can drive that upsell. You can get that $20 more out of the consumer by just offering a much larger data plan, right? So the challenge there, Kelsey, is to then get these guys to think, what next? When I've got a 500 gigabyte plan or a 1 or 2 terabyte plan, or I've gone true unlimited, where do I go from here? So options do include that bundling, staggering, or speed tiers is another model that we haven't talked about. We have seen our traditional markets that had speed tier plans roll those over to 5G. But we've seen some new countries, some new operators also jump on this bandwagon. So it's doing something a little bit more than just staggering by data size, right? So, for example, in this part of the world, we really wanted China to do something. They were at risk of 4G data commoditization, so they really needed to do something this time around, and they did. So they not only stagger their 5G plans by speed, they also stagger them by data size. So you've got 2 levers there that can entice those consumers up the value chain. And also the Chinese have oodles of 5G rich apps, which they're bundling, offering, staggering, giving for free, inbuilt monetization. Like, they are quite ahead of the curve, similar to the Korean ranking in terms of how they're driving that story. So if I had to do my rankings, I would probably put Korea, China, and Japan in that sort of tier 1, trying to pull as many levers as they can to drive that up. So it doesn't have to be just those new sexy levers, right? It can be some of the traditional levers as well. So not so much voice these days, and definitely not text. They've commoditized, but things like roaming allowances, things like device insurance. On the expensive Korean plans, you get that built in. On the cheaper plans, you don't. So it's about, what levers do I have? Where do I as a telco fit in the value chain? And what can I sort of drip feed into these different plans? So it's a big value chain.
I like the idea of adding in the roaming allowances and device insurance, because all that stuff just adds up after a while, and it's so frustrating, especially when you're I've had times where I didn't plan ahead and then ended up, I was traveling to another country and then I'm having trouble upping my service, and it's just a pain. So having some of those things built in, I'd be willing to pay a little bit more, I think.
Right. And I think some of that low-hanging fruit sometimes gets missed. So, yes, I spent a lot of my days saying, upsell to these new Butte 5G things, which still need to get better. But don't forget that low-hanging fruit as well.
I've got an observation. It turns out I'm a terrible interviewer because I can't quite figure out how to put this into a question. But the observation is that here in the U.S. market, for what you're saying, telcos need to really embrace content-rich apps to make the most out of 5G monetization in the long run. Unfortunately, especially in the U.S. market, they sort of ceded that to the phone manufacturers, Google and Apple, quite a long time ago. They aren't really known. The telcos here aren't really known for their app stores or for even delivering apps directly to consumers. I guess they could bundle stuff in the phone itself. So there's where I should have a good question, but I don't really have one. I'm just noticing that and going, what about that?
I know where you're going. I'm with you. No.
Okay. yeah, that's good. Yeah.
No, you're right. I think in the US, very, shall we say, preoccupied with the network rollout, and started off at Wave. Now we've got some new spectrum. Rollout, targets. Where are we at on moving beyond just the initial phase? So, and that's okay. Other markets here in Australia, we're very much still at that level as well. And then once the network is beyond sort of just that hotspot coverage, you can't really innovate if you've just got a few cities covered, right? So we get that done first, and then these types of operators can start thinking, where am I going to play? And you know what, just like today, some operators won't play in this 5G rich app space. So let me clarify that. You might have your value seeking, your disruptor operators in the market, maybe your smaller MVNOs. They may not bundle those 5G rich apps. That's a whole layer of resource that they might not have at their fingertips. But those tier ones are certainly starting to talk more about that as the networks get some coverage layer and some substance to them. So in the US, I'm seeing things like operators start to talk this way. So we've got the emergence of Bookful. Bookful is a partner that you see dotted around the globe. They're one of the guys that do those 3D Kids ebooks. We see them emerge in the US. We see mobile gaming start to emerge in the US. And we see partnerships with some of the established guys like Snapchat having a partnership in the US, and we see in Canada TikTok working with Bell on an exclusive app for 5G that allows you to paint over your TikTok in real time with your mates, right? So those markets, tier ones, operators are starting to catch up, and there's rumblings of that in this market and other markets as well. So a country like Singapore, we've seen Singtel, for example, only recently go down this route now that they're also happy with their network, which they're also upgrading to standalone. So not all operators will do it. It's coming for some. We'll put them in just a bracket under the Chinese and the Koreans, and that the Chinese and Koreans sort of had all their guns lined up from day dot, right? They had the coverage, they had the handsets,
right.
They had the apps, right? So all of that worked from right from the start. But there's a bit of a laggard in different parts of the value chain elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's where it'll be interesting for the US companies is, can they branch out more? Can they make those partnerships with app companies? Can they, can they do more than just offering free or discounted access to services? Can they actually do what a couple of those operators you mentioned are doing and integrate them in such a way where they're adding value? There's a value to not just using the app, but using the app specifically on their 5G network.
That's right.
That unlocks something more exceptional than just the regular app.
Yeah, and that value of unlocking is, of course, leveraging 5G's lower latency. That's leveraging 5G's faster speed. I mean, you could do cloud gaming on 4G, but it probably ain't going to be a very good experience. And you can buy your sneakers, you can buy your latest joggers from your 3D. Yeah. That's not going to be nice either. So that is another point. Yeah. So
I was just imagining trying to try on. Can you try them on 3D? How would that be?
That's
awkward?
where the AR comes in, right?
Yeah.
Without stepping on your phone and breaking it as you attempt to do that.
It's a perfect fit. Oh no.
Yeah, I was about to say we definitely have to run video of us using AR for the first time to try on shoes. This is going to be tragic and quite funny.
The Outsider.
Yeah. I'll see what fun we've got. Thank you 5G for giving us this giggle.
Right.
Okay, Kelsey, last question or observation is yours, and then I think we need to probably wrap up.
Have you looked at all, I suppose, from a demographic perspective of, are there certain consumers that are, likely to be more of the first adopters for those, 5G rich apps? When you're describing painting over TikTok, I feel old saying this, but I'm like, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't know. I feel like for kids in high school or college, they might really enjoy that, but
is this where you just tell us to get off your lawn? Is that your?
Well, certain kids, yeah, not in my backyard. Get those TikToks out of here.
Yeah, and I think for us, we'll throw cloud gaming into that because I feel old. But I'm up to speed on what metaverse means now, so I'm feeling fairly cool. But yeah, a lot of this stuff has appeal to that younger demographic. But the question is around affordability. Can they afford that 5G handset which you've got to buy? Can they afford those premium 5G plans? So it comes down to that to a big degree. But one thing I am noticing is that 5G isn't necessarily just this very expensive premium only for oldies that can afford it type thing. It's very quickly trickling down. So smaller data allowances. There's in Europe and other places, there's actually already dedicated youth 5G plans. So it's also trickled into the prepaid space. So and a lot quicker have we started to temper this 5G this way compared to 4G. They kind of got stuck up here and didn't move as a very expensive service for a lot longer. But very quickly, I think the operators have gone, hang on a minute, we've got these kind of apps that appeal to this kind of demographic. We've got to get that pricing trickling down to make that, at least on the plan front, affordable. And the good news is that the handsets are moving in the right direction as well. So like sub $300 you can get handsets for. So I think this time around, more of those parts of the value chain are helping the demographic that you mentioned have that increased affordability for 5G.
Okay.
Fantastic.
As long as someone
can
make use of that TikTok
feature.
That's right.
Yeah, right. It's not going to be me either. But well, anyway, this story's evolving. Of course, you can keep up with all the 5G news on lightreading.com. For Nicole's fine work, you can go to omdia.com and check out the latest 5G consumer research. Our recent report is on 5G data and tariff innovation for the operators and trends to watch in 2022 for Omdia subscribers. If you were wondering what metaverse is, that is a breakfast cereal. So I can tell you more about that some other time. And thanks to Nicole for being on the podcast today. Really great to meet you, and thanks for your insights.
Had so much fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nicole.